The Hara house was completed in 1913. It is said that the completion of the house took 22 years, and preparation of the timber required about 20 years. The whole house was made of zelkova, and the main timber was taken from a forest owned by a family in Yokohama. Various restrictions on building techniques were lifted during the Meiji period. This allowed carpenters specializing in building shrines and temples to begin devoting their skills to building magnificent houses. The Hara family used to run a wholesale manure store along the Nokohara Highway. After becoming a wealthy landowner, Hara opened his bank and also went into politics. He became the chairperson of the Kanagawa Prefectural Assembly for 2 generations. After the war, this house was used as a high-end Japanese restaurant. The Suzuki House was an inn called Akoraya, located in a post town on the Oshu Highway, and was an inn for horse traders and horse drivers. Deep eaves, hanging wooden sunscreens, and latticed windows were typical architectural features of buildings in post towns during the Edo period. The Suzuki family was primarily engaged in rice farming and sericulture, although at times, they also brewed soy sauce and miso. Only the main building of the Suzuki House has been donated and relocated to the museum. Horse trading had become popular during the Edo period, and horse fairs were held in various districts. The Tohoku region was well known for good horses, and a large number of horses and horse brokers gathered at the horse fairs along the Oshu route from the neighboring villages. Most of the guests of the Suzuki family were horse brokers with their horses. The stable could accommodate a dozen or so horses. Akoraya charged 1.5 yen including horses' expenses for an overnight stay. Due to the development of the railway, the inn was closed in 1887. The Ioka House. This building was used as a shop and faced the Yaju Road. Originally, it was an oil shop, but later it was changed to an incense shop. The front facade of the building is characterized by the porch roof, lattice work, a folding display stand, and a raising door. Those were common features typical of this kind of shop. The plaster walls, pillars, and the tiled roof were elements used to protect the city house against fire. The right part of the house was used as a shop while the left side was used for trading and negotiation. This gate was originally located to the southeast of Nagoya Castle and was the entrance to a samurai residence. The main building of the residence is conserved in Nagoya, and only the gate was relocated here. The gate has been positioned so that the Misawa house beyond it can stand in for the missing main building of the residence. The gate was built in the Munikado style. The small projecting roofs were used to hang lanterns. The interior waiting space was a room for retainers while their samurai master paid a visit to the owner of this residence. The Misawa House was originally located at Inabi-juku, a post town on the Ina Road which branched off from the Nakasendo Road. The family was originally engaged in farming and was the leader of this village for generations. At the end of the Edo period, they also started to produce and trade in medicine. The timber roof of the Misawa house is known as the stone-weighted timbered roof of chestnut wood. The timbers were held with horizontal bars of split cypress wood and weighted with flat stones. In summer, the timbered boards often dried out and warped, and sudden rain easily leaked through the roofs. While the boards were flipped every 2 to 3 years, they often suffered from water damage as the roofs sloped too gentle to drain rainwater. Imoi village in Nagano Prefecture was a village in a mountain valley and was rich in clear water from Mount Lizuna. There were about 30 water mills which used this water. The water mill here was in a group of houses in Ikedera where all the houses managed and used it in turns every other day. There were 2 pounders, 1 flour mill and 1 straw tamper inside the mill. In Ikedera, people mainly grew rice and wheat and processed them by using the mill. This building was the residence of the village head. Local records show that it was built in 1731. Another Fushing register in 1747 tells of the addition of a suite of 2 guests' rooms. Originally this was a farmhouse. There was a time when the Sasaki family operated a dye house. The mezzanine of the house was used as a private elementary school for village children. There was a urinal toilet for the Sasaki family at the entrance of the house. Basically, it was for men to use, but when no sign of people were around, women would secretly use it. The collected urine at the bottom was used as a manure. The toilet for stool was set up in the backyard. The Sasakis made good use of fertile soil and a rich water supply. They produced rice and farmed out sections to tenant farmers to generate income. They were also engaged in sericulture, raising silkworms on shelves set up indoors. The Sasakis were wealthy farmers, but their daily life was hard and plain. They had rice, miso soup, and pickled vegetables for breakfast and lunch, and wheat noodles for supper. They rarely ate fish or meat. They mostly wore the same clothes day after day. During winter, they had only kotatsu and hibachi for heat. At night, because the futon would freeze to their mouths, they went to bed with their head and face covered with a cloth. Snow frequently blew into the house through the slits of the roof ridge. Both the Gokuyama area in Toyama Prefecture and the Shirakawa area in Gifu Prefecture are well known for their gassho-style houses. Most of the farmers were not able to make their living only from the soil. Male villagers tended to work away from home after the autumn harvest, leaving women at home during the winter. The Emikai house is composed of 3 stories. The 2nd and 3rd floors were only used for sericulture. The family lived on the 1st floor, covered with wooden boards. 2 tatami mats were only in the sleeping room of the family head. The meals were mainly prepared from vegetables and edible wild plants. The family head and the eldest son were specially treated with cooked white rice, while the others ate the boiled pumpkin. On special events, all the relatives gathered around the delicious food prepared from spring plants like Japanese royal ferns. The Emikai family grew rice and crops initially for home consumption. They were engaged in sericulture until the early 1950s, raising silkworms once a year, placing the silkworm racks on the 2nd floor of their house. The family also made paper. Papermaking was the work of women during the off-season of farming. There were 2 groups of houses facing each other across the Sokai River in the very back of the Gokuyama area. This river is the border of 2 prefectures. The Gifu side is called Kazura, and the Toyama side is called Kotsura. Kotsura was submerged due to the construction of a dam, but the Yamada house was one of the 5 houses in the village and was saved and moved to this park. Large pots used crystalline salt for making gunpowder in the Gokuyama area. This was done under the floorboards of the house. The Yamada family continued making the salt after the Meiji period for the purpose of bear hunting. The Kotsura village was located so deep in Gokuyama that even some villagers were unaware of the end of the war. Since it was an area of high snowfall, the village was isolated during the winter. If someone got sick, others had to take the sick person to the hospital, crossing the snow-covered mountains. People needed substantial amounts of firewood to survive through the winter. The firewood was carried by sled from the snowy mountains. There were few rice fields around the Yamada house at the Kotsura village because of sloping land. This land was more suited for fire farming. After mowing and burning the ground, people sowed seed directly on the burned field without tilling the land. Silkworms were raised on the first and second floor of the Yamada house. The family also engaged in the making of charcoal. A shed, called henchagoya, was the toilet for stool. During winter, the Yamadas set up a snow fence not only around the house, but also the toilet. There was a big pot called bentsubo with some boards for squatting. Natural materials, such as straw and mugwort leaves, were used for cleaning. All of this was used as manure in the fields. The Nohara house was located in Toga Valley in Gokuyama. Though in the same district, houses here had their main entrance on the side which ran parallel to the roof ridge, and had a 3-room plan. There were huge beams in the ceiling, and the naturally curved beams were skillfully arranged to support the upper structure. The Yamashita family house is a Gasurozukuri house from Shirakawago town. Although there are no documents showing when it was built, it is thought to have been built from the end of the 18th century to the beginning of the 19th century. The house was purchased by a Kawasaki company in 1958, relocated to Kawasaki, and used as a restaurant. However, a few years later, a fire broke out. Although business has since resumed, the company president decided to let go of the building and approached the park. Today, the lower floor is used for a popular soba restaurant, and the upper floor is an exhibition gallery. This house was originally located in Kujukuri, an area made prosperous by sardine fishing. But the Sakuda family had their house further inland, so the house does not give the impression of being a fisherman's house. The buildings stand side by side, with their eaves touching, creating a distinctive exterior. This is a Bunto-style house. Storehouses built atop columns were called takakura. They are a protection against the elements and animals. To enter, people climb up a ladder made from a single piece of timber. The space below the floor was used as a children's play area, a workplace to grind paddy rice, or as a rest room. This kind of storehouse was an indication of wealth, as only a family with plentiful harvests would need such a facility to store their rice. The houses in the Kofu Basin are well known for their gabled roofs, pillars, and windows. They were a wealthy farming household, but daily life was very simple and self-sufficient. At the middle of the Meiji period, 7 people lived beneath the large roof. They kept 2 horses in the stable. There was no bathroom in the house. Instead, they had a quick bath in a washtub. They wore cotton kimono made from cotton spun at home, and wore straw sandals. Meals consisted mainly of cereals like corn flour or barley and vegetables. Because adults were busy with sericulture, children helped by gathering firewood and cooking meals. To generate income during the off-season, the family provided a system of transportation to relay loads from one region to another. This house is a Bunto-style house, which is characterized by the structurally independent buildings connected to the eaves. At the end of the Edo period, Magaria-style farmhouses were built in Ibaraki and Tokaji prefectures. The Ota house has many characteristics of the Magaria-style farmhouses. As the Ota house had 2 roofs, there was a large wooden gutter fixed between the eaves of the roofs in the house. When it rained heavily, people of the house had to remove the gutter debris even at night. The Ota family were farmers producing rice, wheat, buckwheat, peanuts, and sweet potatoes. They shipped charcoal and firewood to neighboring regions and were briefly involved in sericulture and the making of Japanese paper. The Kitamura family owned vast fields and was engaged in farming. The entire family worked in the fields from morning till night, even if it snowed. According to Mrs. Kiku Kitamura, she changed her clothes into a kimono and a coverall apron as soon as she woke up. The staple food was wheat, sweet potatoes, and taros. They cooked their food on sunken hearths and took their meal at the low dining table or by the fireside. It was chilly in the winter even inside the house. The house was always clean and tidy, and the children polished the floor and posts before going to school. The Kiyomiya house was originally located in Kawasaki near the present site of Nihon Minka-en. It was built sometime toward the beginning of the Edo period. The roof ridge is covered with earth planted with grass and flowers to prevent it from being washed away. This type of roof is called shibamune. It conveys the rustic character of the old farmhouses of western Musasha. The Kiyomiya family worked as carpenters since there were no other joiners in Noborito. The family contracted for joinery work as well. When building a house, the trees from the mountain were pulled down to the valley by a sawyer and dried for a year. The family were also accountants of land tax and traders of firewood and charcoal with the merchants of Edo. The Ito house was the first house moved to Nihon Minka-en. The earthen-floored area, doma, is divided into a kitchen and a storeroom for miso. 3 solid posts divide the boundary between the doma and the living room, hiroma, into 4 bays. The front lattice windows are called shishioke mado and were built to prevent animals from coming inside. They were common to traditional folk houses in the Kanto region. This toilet was behind the main house and was surrounded by hedges so that it could not be seen from the outside. In front of the toilet entrance, there was a rainwater barrel, which was used for hand washing. Kokugisen is a shrine dedicated to the patron deity of sericulture. The grass ridge of the thatched roof has irises planted in it, which look beautiful when they bloom in the spring. The shrine is decorated with relief carvings which tell the story of the golden princess who was born in India, and after overcoming for hardships, arrived in Japan. She introduced the technology of sericulture to Japan. This house belonged to the village headman and was located deep in the mountains. The Iwasawa family made fields on the slopes of the valley, and during the Edo period were engaged in wood cutting, charcoal making, and burn farming. The Iwasawa family didn't have a well. Until the mid-1960s, they went to the river for water. They used to go to the river to do the washing or to brush their teeth every morning. The family had a hut called an okagoya, which was for growing tea. The family was involved in both rice and dry goods product Ultion. The Iwasawa family also grew silkworms during which they removed all tatami mats from the floor, and the family slept in another room. This kabuki stage was originally located in the precinct of a village shrine. Funakoshi was a prosperous fishing village, which was famous for its women divers called ama. This was a place where plays were performed. Most of the facilities needed for kabuki performances were provided in this building. The kanji character found on an ornamental tile meant the existence of a traditional organization of young people associated with the establishment and management of this kabuki stage. The Suge crossing of the Toma River was a ferry hut connecting Suge and Chofu. This ferry was used by people for carrying agricultural products as well as for transportation. It was at this hut that ferrymen waited for their passengers. Ferrymen were able to see passengers on the other bank through a small window on the back wall. There are many Minka from the Nambu domain that have an L-shaped plan with a stable projecting from the front of the main building. Magaria are considered to have been developed during the mid-Edo period when the breeding of horses became a major occupation among farmers. This house is one of the oldest Magaria in existence. With no ceilings, the Kudo family house was cold in the winter. Since tatami mats were only used when there were guests, the family lived on cold wooden floors. Ragged futon, filled with straw or cotton, were used for sleeping. Before they went to bed, they cleaned around the sunken hearth, watered embers, added firewood to cinder, and hardened the circuit with ash. As farmers, the kudos primarily grew apples and other fruit, but sericulture and growing leaf tobacco were their major source of income. The kudos kept 2 horses. Horses were indispensable for cultivating fields and pulling carts. They stamped straw to be made into compost in the stable, and their urine was used as manure. The earthen floor of the stable was inclined, so that the urine went out of the house to be stored outside. When sick, horses received medical care. When they died, they were buried in graves marked with a straw horse. In Tomujimata village at the foot of Mount Udono, there are unusual houses in a style known as happozukuri. Their features are that they had 1 or 2 stories of lofts for raising silkworms, lit by hipped gables, and a distinctive kind of dormer window called a happo. The second floor of the house was used for silkworm cultivation. The Sugawaras cultivated rice and other grains as well as growing vegetables and cereals for family consumption. Horses and cows were used in the field and as beasts of burden. They also kept sheep, goats, pigs, chickens, and cats. The family engaged in sericulture and charcoal production as their primary source of income. As the Sugawaras had many children, they put their daughters out to service to a big farmhouse for a fixed period. In winter, the Matsuzawa settlement used to have 3 meters of snow. Winters lasted from mid-November to early May, and the temperature often fell to 3 degrees below zero. A straw barrier protected the house from snow damage, and a pond circling the house served as a reservoir and to help snow melt. Sleds, takanoma, were used to carry goods, and people wore snowshoes, kanjiki, in the snow.